My name is Carol Thompson. I'm 59 years old, and I live alone in a small town upstate, where the lake catches the afternoon light like a secret. My house sits near the edge of the water, tucked behind a row of maples that hold their golden leaves a little longer than they should this time of year. Mornings are quiet here. I wake early without an alarm, put on the same gray cardigan, and brew a single cup of coffee. The floor creaks under my slippers as I walk to the kitchen window, where I watch squirrels skitter across the porch rail, their little feet pattering like distant memories. This place used to feel too quiet. After Gregory and I divorced, the silence was something I had to learn to live with. We were married for 35 years, long enough to forget what it felt like to be alone. When he left and moved in with his new wife, a woman young enough to call me mom, without irony, I told myself I was choosing peace. I let him keep the house in Connecticut, the fine stemware, the art I never liked. I took this cottage by the lake because it felt like mine, even if it was the smallest thing we'd ever owned. Now the quiet no longer scares me, but sometimes, late at night, I still listen for sounds that aren't there. I don't miss Gregory, not really. What I miss is the rhythm of life when the house was full. The smell of burnt toast on Sunday mornings. The door opening at odd hours with one of the kids shouting for laundry help. Those sounds have faded now, replaced by birdsong and the hum of the refrigerator. Our 3 children are grown. Josh lives about 20 minutes away with his wife and son. He's the one who checks in now and then brings over groceries when the weather turns. Liz lives down in Austin, always too busy but still sweet on the phone. And Emily and I don't talk much anymore. She drifted off after the divorce. I try not to take it personally. Everyone handles their grief in their own way. Thanksgiving is around the corner. I've hosted it every year since Liz was in kindergarten, even during the worst of things. I still bring out the same recipes. Sweet potato casserole with too many marshmallows. Turkey brined overnight in rosemary and lemon. Cranberry sauce from scratch, not the canned kind Gregory liked. I use the same linen napkins my mother embroidered in the 70s. A little frayed at the edges now, but still soft with memory. This year, though, something feels off. It's hard to explain. The air feels different, like a change is coming, though the trees haven't told me what kind. I've cleaned the guest room, set out the good china, made sure the wine glasses are spotless. I even polished the silver serving fork, the one we only use once a year. But I can't shake the feeling that this won't be just another dinner. There's something else under the surface. I find myself pausing more often, standing still in doorways, hands damp from dishwater, as if I've forgotten what I was about to do. It's not age, it's not forgetfulness. It's something in my bones, a quiet knowing, like when you feel a storm before it reaches your doorstep. I look at the lake through the living room window. The water is still today, holding the sky like a mirror. It reminds me of the years when we used to bring the kids here during summer breaks, before Gregory started coming home late, before Liz went to college and Emily got quiet, before I became the one holding everything together while no one noticed. Sometimes I wonder what the kids remember. Do they recall the laughter around the fire pit, or just the way Gregory's voice tightened when I asked questions about money? Do they see me as the mother who always made sure their favorite pie was on the table, or just the woman who never left? I've never asked. Maybe I'm afraid of the answer. The house smells like cinnamon and roasted squash. The oven timer ticks toward the next dish. I wipe my hands on a dish towel and check the list stuck to the fridge. Everything's accounted for. Everything looks the same. But it isn't. And I know deep in the part of me that still aches when the wind shifts that this Thanksgiving won't be like the others. Something is coming. I just don't know what shape it'll take yet. My phone rang just after lunch on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. It was Josh. His voice came through the speaker light and cheerful, that slightly distracted tone he always has when he's juggling 100 things at once. He was calling to confirm dinner said they'd be there by 4, and that Liz would bring her sweet potato casserole if her flight wasn't delayed. I said the usual things. Everything's ready, table's set. I even pulled out the pine cone centerpiece we used when they were kids. He thanked me and then added like it was an afterthought that his father wanted to come by a little early, just to drop something off, a couple of papers he needed me to sign. I paused for a moment before answering, not long enough to be obvious but long enough to hear my own breath. I asked what kind of papers. Josh said something vague about the lake house, some sort of update with the property records. Just a formality, he said. Shouldn't take more than a minute. I told him that was fine and hung up not long after. But I stood in the kitchen for a good while afterward, one hand resting on the corner of the counter. Something about the way he'd said it, the way it had been slipped in between dinner talk and flight times. It didn't sit right. The lake house. That word carries 1,000 images for me. Gregory and I bought it during the better years, when things between us still felt like a shared project. The kids learned to swim in that lake. Josh chipped his front tooth jumping off the dock when he was 8. Liz used to line up her dolls on the porch rail and give them names from whatever chapter book she was reading. Emily once wrote her first story there, tucked in the attic room with a flashlight and a bag of jelly beans. After the divorce, Gregory said we should keep it in both our names. Said it made sense for tax purposes. Said it would be good for the kids. I didn't argue. I was tired back then. Tired in a way I didn't have language for. I let him keep the big house and the fancy glassware, and told myself I was lucky to still have the lake. We hadn't used it in years, not as a family anyway, but I never stopped picturing it. Sometimes I'd imagine repainting the shutters or fixing the screen door that always banged shut. I still paid the property tax on time, half every June and December, even though I never set foot on the porch. Maybe I was keeping it for someone, or maybe I just wanted something left that hadn't been ruined. As I stood in my kitchen, I looked around at the list I'd written on the fridge. Stuffing, cranberry sauce, warm cider. No mention of signing papers. No note that Gregory would be visiting. Just tasks, reminders, all designed to make things look like they used to. I don't know when it started, but over the years I became the one who remembered everything. Birthdays, anniversaries, doctor's appointments. Who likes which pie? I kept track of it all without being asked like a human calendar in an apron. No one ever told me they expected it, but they never questioned it either. Maybe that's why this feels so familiar, this quiet expectation that I'll nod and smile and say, of course. That I'll pass the gravy, then sign whatever paper is placed in front of me without reading the fine print. Because I've always been the one holding things together. But something about this year feels different. Maybe it's the way Josh didn't really ask, just informed. Maybe it's the way he called it a formality, like my signature was the only thing left to rubber stamp a decision already made. Maybe it's just my bones knowing what my heart hasn't caught up to yet. There's a weight to the air now, not heavy, just dense like fog before a storm. I keep checking the guest towels, rearranging napkin rings, small things that give my hands purpose. But even as I move through my rituals, there's a voice inside me that won't quiet. What am I really preparing for? The house smells like nutmeg and butter, the kind of scent that used to make the kids race down the stairs. I've set the table with the good plates and the wine glasses no one ever wants to wash. In the hall closet, I've laid out extra scarves in case the weather turns, even though no one ever takes them. I still want this to feel like home for them, but I'm beginning to wonder if they see this place as anything more than tradition. A checkpoint, a polite stop between airport gates and calendar reminders. They'll smile and hug and say thanks, but will they look me in the eye? Will they see me? I'm not angry, not yet, just aware, like someone who finally realizes she's the only one still standing after the music stops. Tomorrow they'll come with their stories and updates and casual mentions of things already decided. And Gregory will ring the bell at 3 with his papers and his cologne and that careful voice he uses when he wants something. I'll pour cider, I'll light the candles, I'll listen. But this year I won't be signing anything until I understand exactly what I'm being asked to give up. At exactly 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I had just finished basting the turkey and wiping down the countertops when I heard the familiar chime. My hands were damp from dishwater as I walked toward the front door, heart steady but curious. Gregory stood on the porch, every detail of him arranged with intention. His coat was buttoned cleanly dark wool with a crisp collar. His silver hair carefully combed caught the afternoon light, and his cologne hung in the air just long enough to remind me of boardroom meetings and late-night fundraisers. He smiled, the kind of smile that once made real estate clients feel heard. I opened the door without stepping aside. He greeted me like it hadn't been years since we last spoke face to face. I nodded and motioned for him to come in. Inside the house smelled of thyme and roasted carrots. The parlor fire was already going. Gregory looked around as he walked in his eyes, glancing over the framed photos on the mantel, as if taking quiet inventory of what still remained mine. I motioned toward the living room. We sat opposite each other, the coffee table between us bare, except for a small candle. He pulled a tan folder from his leather satchel and placed it on the table like it was nothing at all. He said the developers just needed a quick signature for a title update, something about zoning paperwork, just a formality. I nodded slowly, letting his words sit in the air. I didn't reach for the folder. I asked what they were developing. His voice brightened as he listed off the details. A resort, spa, golf course, high-end clientele, big returns. He said it like I should be proud. Like the lake where our children learned to swim was just another empty plot with market potential. My gaze stayed on the folder. I asked when the deal was made. He hesitated, then admitted the talks had been ongoing for a few months. I asked if he planned to tell me at all, or if he just expected a signature with the stuffing. His smile faltered. He said he assumed Josh would mention it. I could feel the shift then, like a small crack forming beneath the surface. I asked how much they were offering. He gave me a number, big enough to turn heads, big enough to make someone forget the memories attached to the land. I asked what my share would be. He leaned back slightly, crossed one leg over the other, and said, well, technically the original purchase came from his premarital assets, that his lawyer had the documents, that I might not be entitled to much at all. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward or blink too fast. I just sat with it. I reminded him we bought the lake house 10 years into the marriage with savings from both our salaries. I reminded him of the weekend trips, the new dock, the way he used to call it, our escape. His voice softened, tried to sound reasonable. He said he didn't want this to be difficult, that it could be simple if I just trusted him. That was the moment something quiet inside me began to lock into place. I looked at the folder again, still unopened, still waiting, but I knew in that exact second that I would not sign a thing until I understood exactly what was being taken. Because this wasn't about the property. It was about a pattern, about being asked once again to give up something sacred just to keep the peace. He shifted in his chair. The fire crackled behind us. Outside, the lake reflected the early shadows of evening. I met his eyes steady and calm. He didn't know it yet, but he was not the only one who had come prepared. Gregory picked up the folder again and slid it a few inches closer to me. He said the paperwork was just a standard authorization for the developer to move forward. Nothing binding, nothing complicated. Just a signature to ease the process. I asked why my name was still on the title if I wasn't supposed to be involved. He looked down for a second before replying. Said it had been easier for taxes that way. Cleaner, he called it. I pressed him. Asked how he planned to split the profit. That's when his expression shifted. Not a flinch, but something colder. He said carefully that his lawyer believed I had no rightful claim to the proceeds. I asked why. He said the original down payment came from a trust his father set up before our marriage. That technically the house should have been his alone. That the court might even agree. I sat very still. Every sound in the room felt sharper. The tick of the wall clock. The low hiss from the fire. The way he cleared his throat just once as if to soften the blow. I reminded him we paid the mortgage together for years. Renovated it. Raised our children there. Celebrated birthdays, endured storms, scattered ashes. He shrugged. Said it wasn't personal, just business. That was when the silence inside me shifted. It wasn't the money, it was the assumption. That I would agree because I always had. That I would swallow it because I'd rather keep the peace than make a scene. That I'd sign smile and serve the turkey while they carved up what was left of my life. I looked at Gregory, at the crease in his forehead and the familiar way he tightened his jaw when cornered. He thought I didn't notice, but I always noticed. I just stopped reacting. Now I was done noticing. I was done waiting. I stood slowly and excused myself to check on the rolls in the oven. My hands didn't shake. My breath stayed even. But inside, something had shifted for good. Let them think I'm soft. Let them think I don't see what's happening. That assumption was about to be their biggest mistake. By 4 o'clock, the house was full. The coat rack by the front door sagged under layers of woolen down. Voices echoed through the hallway, laughter bouncing off the walls, a familiar rhythm I hadn't heard in years. Josh came first with his wife Megan and their teenage son Ben. He hugged me quickly, already halfway into a story about traffic on the thruway. Megan handed me a pie she didn't bake and smiled like everything was normal. Liz arrived not long after, dressed in sleek black with her business partner in tow, a woman named Carla, sharp-eyed and polite. They both wore matching coats and carried a bottle of expensive wine I didn't ask for. Then the doorbell rang again and I opened it to find Emily. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray, and her expression unsure. She hugged me like someone unsure whether they were still allowed to. I told her of course she was. Held her a little longer than I meant to. She looked thinner, quieter, but she was here. I told myself that counted. We moved into the dining room. The candles flickered on the table. The turkey glistened under its golden skin. I had laid out the good napkins, the ones with the embroidered corners. Everyone sat in their usual seats without needing to be told. Gregory raised his glass and said something about family, about new chapters and moving forward. The words came easy to him. They always had. I smiled because that's what I do. Plates passed from hand to hand, mashed potatoes stuffing sweet corn. Megan complimented the cranberry sauce. Carla asked about the china pattern. I answered politely, but my thoughts floated. Josh cleared his throat, said he had news. He'd accepted a position overseas. Zurich. A promotion, better schools for Ben. He spoke quickly like a man rehearsing a pitch. He added almost casually that the proceeds from the lake house would help with the move. The relocation bonus covered most of it, but this would ensure stability. I looked at him, then at Gregory, who kept his gaze fixed on his plate. I hadn't signed anything. Liz leaned forward, said her startup was growing, that a small cash infusion could really change things, that family investments were the foundation of generational wealth. She smiled like she was doing me a favor by including me in the conversation. I looked around the table. Their voices swirled together, plans, timelines, terms like liquidity and projected growth, as if I had already agreed, as if my name on the deed was just a footnote. The turkey cooled. The candles burned lower. I said little, nodding now and then, but something in me had begun to retreat. I had set the table, I had cooked the meal, I had sent the invites, prepared the bedrooms, lit the fire, but I was not at the center of this gathering. I was the setting, the stage, a detail in their larger plan. No one asked how I felt about the lake house. No one asked what I wanted. They assumed my silence meant consent, that my quiet nature meant agreement. They had mistaken habit for approval, comfort for loyalty, but they were wrong. I passed the rolls, smiling at Ben as he thanked me. He was the only one who looked me in the eye that night. The only one who noticed when I paused mid-sentence, as if tasting something bitter in my mouth. I watched them talk about their futures, their needs, their visions. I listened, I learned. And quietly, I began to let go of the idea that they saw me as anything more than a resource. A name to sign, a room to gather in, a woman they trusted to always say yes. I picked up my wine glass and held it steady. The reflection of the chandelier sparkled in the red swirl. I had hosted this meal for 30 years. This was the last time I would do it on their terms. The room had gone too quiet. I looked at the faces around the table and realized none of them expected me to say anything. They thought this would pass like a polite conversation tidied up by dessert. I set down my fork and folded my hands in my lap. My voice was calm even. I asked if anyone had thought to check whether I had actually agreed to sell the lake house. The silence that followed was thick. Josh blinked, first confused for a second, then defensive. He said we all knew it was the logical thing to do, that the property was old, unused, that it made no sense to keep it for the sake of nostalgia. I asked again if anyone had asked me. Liz looked away. Carla pressed her lips together. Megan shifted in her seat. Emily stared at her plate like she wanted to disappear. Josh stood up, his voice sharper now. Said I was making things harder than they needed to be. Said this wasn't about me. Said it was about the future, about opportunity, about family. I didn't move. I just asked one last time, did you decide without me because you thought I wouldn't fight back? That was when it happened. So fast I didn't register the motion until it landed. His hand struck my cheek open and hard. The sound cracked through the room like wood snapping in a fire. I stumbled into the cart beside me. A platter slid to the floor and shattered. No one spoke. Ben gasped. Megan covered her mouth. Liz froze mid-breath. Gregory didn't move. Emily looked up, her eyes wide and unblinking. I didn't cry. I didn't speak for a full breath. Then I straightened. I touched my cheek, felt the sting settle into a deep heat. I looked at my son and I said one sentence. Thank you for showing them exactly who you are. His face went pale. He took a step back. The air had changed. For the first time in years, I felt taller than everyone in the room. The shame didn't belong to me. It hung on him now, on the silence that followed, on the way everyone else avoided my eyes. I had been quiet for a long time, but the line was crossed, and I would not be going back. I didn't rush. I walked to the cabinet near the stairs, opened the drawer slowly, and pulled out the leather folder I had placed there earlier that morning. I had touched it 3 times that week, unsure each time if I'd ever need it. But something in me had known. When I returned to the table, no one had moved. Ben was still sitting with his hands in his lap. Liz looked like she might speak, but nothing came. Josh had backed away from the table, his hands at his sides, his breath shallow. Gregory stood perfectly still, arms crossed, waiting. I placed the folder on the table without a word. My fingers rested on the worn leather as I looked at each of them. Then I opened it and pulled out the first document. The title was clear. A transfer of deed, filed with the county clerk's office almost 3 years ago. I slid it across the table to Gregory. He glanced at it, then frowned. I told him to read it, slowly. He picked it up and scanned the first page. His face changed on the second. On the third, he stopped. I told him it was real, that his former assistant Daniel had notarized it during the week his company was being audited, that he had signed without reading, distracted by headlines and lawyers calling his cell phone. He said it had to be a mistake, that I had tricked him. I reminded him that he'd handed me the file himself thinking it was a tax document, that he had initialed every page, that he had never checked what he was signing. For 3 years, the lake house had belonged to me, fully, quietly, legally. He could verify it with the county records. The proof was public. A heavy silence filled the room. Emily blinked like she was trying to understand. Liz opened her mouth, then closed it again. Josh looked down at the floor. I reached into the folder again and pulled out the second file. This one was thicker. I didn't hand it to anyone. I laid it flat on the table and opened it 1 page at a time. It was a forensic audit, commissioned 2 years ago. Every dollar Gregory had siphoned from joint accounts during the final years of our marriage. Every shell company he moved funds through. Every transaction traced and verified. He reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. I said the originals were with my attorney. These were copies, evidence. Gregory's face went white. He called it blackmail. I said it was consequence. He told me I wouldn't dare. I said he didn't know me as well as he thought, that I had been underestimated for too long, that while he was building his empire, I had been building something too. Not louder, not richer, but stronger. Josh finally spoke. He said he hadn't known, that no one told him, that it wasn't supposed to be this way. I told him it was exactly the way it had always been. He just hadn't noticed until now. Liz asked if the audit would go public. I said only if Gregory refused to make it right. I wasn't looking to destroy anyone. I was looking to be left alone. Megan was crying quietly now. Ben looked between all the adults like he was seeing each one for the first time. Emily stared at the tablecloth. I looked at each of my children. I told them I knew what this looked like, that it felt dramatic, harsh, maybe even cruel, but that this was what clarity looked like after years of being treated like background. I said I didn't expect them to understand, but I would no longer let them make decisions for me about me or around me. Gregory's voice cracked when he spoke again, said I could ruin him. I said that was his choice, not mine. I closed the folder and picked it up, walked it back to the cabinet, placed it exactly where it had been before. Then I turned back to the table and looked at the remains of our dinner. Half-empty plates, burnt rolls, wilting greens. No one touched the pie. I told them the night was over, that anyone who wanted to stay was welcome to clean up, that anyone who didn't want to see me again didn't need to pretend. No one moved at first. Then Liz stood and walked to the sink. Emily picked up a stack of plates. Ben followed silently, carrying a tray of untouched bread. Josh left first, no apology, no glance back, just his coat, his car keys, and the sound of the front door shutting behind him. Gregory left next, quiet, jaw tight. His cologne lingered in the hallway after he was gone. The house felt bigger once they were out. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was clean. I stood at the sink rinsing the same plates I had set with care that morning. Emily dried them beside me. She didn't say much, but when she did, her voice was soft. She said she didn't know everything, but she saw me now. I nodded. That was enough. That night I sat in bed with the folder on my lap. Not to review, just to hold it. Just to remind myself that I hadn't imagined any of it. Power doesn't always come from shouting. Sometimes it comes from preparation, from knowing the truth and being ready to say it when no one else expects you to. And sometimes it comes from knowing when to stop asking to be seen and just start showing them. The next morning, the frost on my windshield cracked beneath the slow sweep of the wipers. I drove through quiet streets, the town still wrapped in sleep, the lake just catching the first blush of sun. My hands didn't tremble on the wheel. I parked outside the brick building where Joanne's office sat above a stationery shop. We'd met freshman year in college, two girls with big dreams and quiet grit. She had stayed sharp, ethical, always 2 steps ahead of anyone who tried to outmaneuver her. She stood as I entered her eyes, catching the bruise still visible on my cheek. She didn't ask what happened, just nodded and offered me a seat. We both knew this day had been coming. The trust documents were already prepared. She slid them across her glass desk, with a pen placed neatly on top. Each page had my name, but by the end of it, my name wouldn't own anything at all. I signed slowly. My home, the lake house, the retirement funds, the liquid savings, all transferred into the Davis Preservation Trust, governed by conditions I had designed with her over the past year. Nothing could be contested, not by Gregory, not by my children. I had watched enough cases fall apart because of unclear terms. Joanne had made sure mine wouldn't be one of them. Next came the restraining orders, one for Gregory, one for Josh. The paperwork was firm, citing risk of emotional harm, physical abuse, and prior intimidation. Witness statements were attached. So was a medical note documenting the bruise. I signed those too, slowly, cleanly. She opened a drawer and handed me a flash drive. I slid it across the table. Inside was an audio file recorded in my own kitchen weeks ago. It captured a conversation between Liz's business partner and Gregory. They didn't know I was in the hallway listening as they discussed plans to declare me unfit, use a doctor on payroll, and gain access to my accounts. Joanne had heard it, so had her paralegal. She said it would hold up. I believed her. The final folder was thicker. A disclosure packet ready to be delivered to the SEC, the IRS, the New York State Bar, and several media contacts. I hadn't sent it yet. I still hadn't decided. She asked if I was sure about all of it. I said yes. I wasn't angry. I was finished. She slid everything into a leather case and locked it. Told me we'd serve the papers at 9 a.m. sharp the next morning. Law enforcement would be present. No one would be allowed to speak to me without legal clearance. We didn't hug when I left. Just a long look between friends who had survived a lot and were done asking permission. The air outside felt lighter. I walked to my car with my shoulders straight, the folder cradled in one arm. I had waited too long for this kind of peace. And now I had it, on my terms. By noon the next day, the headlines started appearing. Gregory Turner steps down amid allegations of financial misconduct. His face, once used in ads for medical innovation, was now the face of a federal investigation. The calls came quickly, Josh first. His voice cracked in the voicemail, half apology, half denial. Liz called twice, then sent a long email. Emily left a short message that ended in tears. I didn't respond to any of them. I had said what I needed to say, not with arguments, not with pleas. I had said it through documents, dates, signatures, and silence. Gregory's company cut ties by the end of the week. His name removed from every letterhead. His access revoked. The audit trail was too clean to deny and too public to bury. I watched the news from a quiet inn just outside of town. I had checked in under my maiden name. The room smelled of cedar and fresh linens. Snow fell outside the window, soft and slow. My phone lit up again. This time a message from a board chairman, then a journalist, then someone from a federal agency. I forwarded them all to Joanne. I didn't reply. Each call was another page closing, each inquiry a seal on the past. I didn't want revenge. I wanted quiet. I wanted the door closed, not slammed. Locked, not barricaded. They could spin their stories, try to rewrite the script, but they couldn't change the facts. This wasn't a victory, it was a release. And I didn't need to say another word. 6 months later, I wake to the sound of water lapping gently against the dock. The lake house feels different now. Not like a memory, but like a beginning. I sold the house in town not long after the court finalized everything. I kept a few things, but not much. Most of it I gave away to neighbors or dropped off at the church on Maple Street. Not because I was angry, not to make a point, just because I didn't need those pieces anymore. What I held on to fits into 3 small boxes, some letters from my mother, a stack of worn paperbacks I've read twice, and a handful of photographs, none framed, just placed neatly in a drawer. The rest of my life lives out here, in the hush of tall pines, in the way the light moves across the lake in the late afternoon, in the scent of coffee and old wood in the mornings. The legal mess is over. Gregory tried to fight, of course, claimed he was misled, manipulated. The court disagreed. The audio recordings, the paperwork, the testimony, it all held. He lost his seat on every board. His pension is locked up in lawsuits. His name carries a weight now, but not the kind he once used to open doors. I don't think about him much, not out of bitterness, just out of distance. He's not here, and I am. Josh wrote letters, dozens. I read some, not all. Liz called once last month, then stopped. Emily sent a birthday card. It was polite, short, and unsigned. None of them know where I live now. I didn't hide, but I didn't announce either. I simply stepped away. Most days are quiet. I walk the edge of the lake. I cook meals with no timeline. I read until I fall asleep in the old chair by the window. I thought the silence might feel lonely, but it doesn't. It feels honest, clean. Sometimes healing isn't about confrontation. It's about choosing what you carry and what you leave behind. And I've chosen stillness. I've chosen myself. Ben comes by most Saturdays just after breakfast. He brings Amber with him, and they always knock even though I tell them not to. He says it's out of respect. I think it's just who he is. They bring groceries, sometimes flowers. He rakes the leaves without asking and fixes anything I've left too long. He never rushes, never hurries through the visits. He just sits on the porch with me watching the light move across the lake. He calls me Grandma. No pause, no distance in his voice. That alone means more than he knows. The others haven't come. Josh sent another card last month, unsigned again. Liz posted a photo from a conference in London. Emily stopped trying after spring. I don't hold it against them. I just no longer wait. Ben never asks for details. He doesn't press. But today he did something different. He was sitting beside me on the dock, his feet dangling above the water. Amber had gone inside to put away some leftovers. The sun was low and the lake was quiet. He looked over at me and asked the question so softly I almost missed it. Do you ever think about forgiving them? I didn't answer right away. I watched the wind push gentle ripples toward the shore. I thought about every Thanksgiving, every silence I had filled with kindness, just to hold the family together. I thought about the moment I stopped pretending. Then I turned to him and told the truth. No, I don't think forgiveness is the answer for everything. Some things are too rooted, too patterned. Forgiving them would mean reopening a door I finally had the courage to close. He didn't flinch, he just nodded. But I forgive myself, I said, for waiting so long, for believing I had to shrink to be loved, for giving parts of myself away without asking for anything in return. He didn't say anything. He just leaned his shoulder gently against mine. I told him I don't live with bitterness. I live with boundaries and peace, and a kind of stillness that isn't quiet because it's empty. It's quiet because it's mine. Ben smiled then, a small knowing smile, the kind that says everything is understood even if no one says it out loud. That was enough. The sun dipped lower, casting gold across the water. I didn't need closure from them. I had given it to myself.